Your art cannot be perfect. But I think you know this. I know this. We all know this, right? We can spout so easily about how art is never perfect, and we are so gracious to all the other people about their work, and yet we are so hard on ourselves. So, what is it then? Do you want your art to be perfect? I guess if we were being honest with this question, we would all probably say yes. But since that isn't possible, is it still a worthy standard? Do we even really mean perfect? Or do we just mean better than last time? I think that's an interesting thing to think about, to dissect in your mind as you think about your own artwork. There's so much to this though. So I guess I'm going to draw the perfect robot while we talk about perfection and perfectionism. Obviously though, this robot isn't perfect. In fact, I worked on it on the heels of the last piece, which turned out different and worse than I wanted it to. So for some reason, I threw out planning and careful anything when I dove into this one. I started with just putting lines on the page, and then slowly crafted them into something. And this kind of thing just arose. I didn't intend this piece to be a reflection of or response to perfectionistic tendencies, but I suppose it works rather well. This piece was specifically designed, as much as any part of it was designed, to de-stress me, to be a piece where I simply let my subconscious play. Ironically, it worked better than the last piece, which I sketched out and had intent for. Now, it's not as simple a case as, oh, this turned out better because I had less pressure on myself or because I didn't plan. There are other pieces to this. I was good and warmed up by the time I started this. I had already finished a drawing, so I didn't have the pressure to do something. I had already completed something. I had not made any imaginative drawings in a couple days, maybe a week. It's been kind of busy, and so getting the first one out of the way might have made this one easier. But all of these things play a part in the perfectionism game, don't they? Can you expect each piece, or any piece, to be perfect when the details, the reality, the history of each piece is so terribly different? It seems probably unreasonable. In a lot of ways, I think what we call perfectionism, or what we think of, at the very least, as perfectionism, is a desire to be better than we currently are. A desire to improve, a desire to grow. And it's the reality that we can look at our own work, look at other people's work, and understand that we still have so much growth that we have to move through. This is, of course, made all the more difficult now because we have access to so many hundreds of thousands of people's artworks just floating around on the internet at our fingertips. That's a strange thing, and not something that any generation in the past has had to deal with in the same way. And I'm sure that it affects us, and almost entirely in the negative. So if we have this desire to improve, we couch it in terms of perfectionism. Is there anything wrong with the desire to improve? I don't think so. I don't know that all of us have it. There are certainly some artists who find joy in what they're doing, who are totally fine just continuing to meander through whatever journey they're on. I am not one of those. I am someone who feels like if I am not continually growing and progressing, that maybe this is all for naught. It's almost like I stave off the demons in the back of my mind by continuing to push forward, like Melania from Elden Ring, who continues to move so that the rot within her body doesn't finally take her. I'm sure there's a lot of other literary metaphors, but Elden Ring's expansion comes out in just a few weeks, and so it is heavy upon my mind. And actually, by the time this comes out, I suppose it will probably already be out. So I hope you're enjoying it, because I hope I'm enjoying it too. I think for most of us, what we label as perfectionism is actually more accurately defined as a desire to improve and to get better. I think for most of us, our so-called perfectionism would be mildly dismantled if we felt like we were constantly improving. I think it's when we feel like we hit that wall that it really rears its ugly head the most. It isn't the only time that it rears its head. I think that it does sit in the background very frequently and just gnaw on us and eat at us. But I think that for many of us, if it was definitively, objectively provable that we were continually improving at, let's just say, a decent rate, then a lot of our perfectionism would disappear. I think if I felt like I was getting 5% better every month, that I would be satisfied with that. And maybe not. Maybe if I was growing 5% every month, I'd want 7% or 10% or something. But I think that if I look at it that way, it would mean I'm improving 60% a year. And that would be an astronomical level of growth, one that probably couldn't be sustained. But I'm able to, with these robots at the very least, look back on the other ones that I've done. This is number 78, if I am correct. And the other 77 are not all worse than this. This one is not the best of them. But if I take every 10 of them, so 1 through 10, 11 through 20, etc., I think each batch is distinctly better than the ones that came before it. In fact, if I go back and I look at the first 10 or so robots I did, they're kind of silly. I hadn't found my stride yet. And there's a lot to that. There's a lot to finding your stride, to figuring out what kind of work you want to make and how you make it, and so many of those things. And this is one of the biggest dangers of perfectionism, is that it gets in the way of that. It gets in the way of you finding your stride, of figuring out how you work. If you spend so much time on a single thing, a single project, a single idea, trying to get it perfect, having perfect understanding of anatomy, maybe, you waste so much time that could be finding your stride, figuring out how you work, who you want to be as an artist. I have found that the more often that I draw, and especially the more often that I draw things that I really enjoy drawing, the more I draw, the more I understand about who I am, and the more I continue to move forward. I've spent a tremendous amount of time in my artistic life working on developing skills that I thought were going to be beneficial for me. And maybe they are, but they didn't keep me in the craft. I've spent a lot of time studying anatomy, a lot of time studying figures and gestures, and most of that time I have not enjoyed it. It has felt like it was homework, and that's fine. That's understandable. Sometimes learning for your hobby or your skill or your craft requires schoolwork, and it's not fun. But I have found recently that when I tailor my work towards things that I enjoy, things that are good for me, I work more, I work longer, I'm content studying, I'm content practicing, and all of those things improve my skills faster than anything else I've found. Now, I'm not assuming that every single one of you is exactly the same as I am, but it seems reasonable to assume that pushing against that perfectionistic tendency, the desire to finish something, to have a perfect understanding of a thing before you move on to the other things beside it, it stands to reason that that probably prohibits growth, that keeps us back from whatever potential we might possess in constantly moving forward and just constantly working. There's a lot of advice floating around on both sides of the draw every day moniker. And I certainly am more of an adherent to, I think it's beneficial to try to draw every day. I don't think that that's going to take care of everything for you, or that it is going to make you a good artist in and of itself. But I think that if you try to dedicate time frequently, specifically dedicating time to the craft, whatever craft it is that you want to work on, I think you will see better growth. If you want to be a writer and you just squeak in writing whenever you quote unquote can, I think you'll improve slower than if you just said, I have 15 minutes a day after I get the kids to sleep, and then I'm going to write. That's all that I can manage. I think you would probably get more done than if you dedicated a single big block once a week or once every other week. There was actually more time. I think that staying in it and working on it frequently will probably improve you more. And this is not just like a theory. There is a lot of psychology that goes into this as well. And there's a lot of my own personal experience that your mind continues to chew on things when you're not doing them. Because I'm working on these kinds of drawings so frequently now, I have a tendency to notice other things, new things, when I look out at the world. When I see construction equipment, I start to understand or break down, or at least look at the shapes and how they're put together. And that stuff comes out in my work later. When I look at other people's drawings of robots, I have a better understanding now of what I'm looking at, and I'm able to metabolize some of those components. And that comes, I think, from spending a lot of time frequently in it. And there are days where I don't draw. There are days where I only get in 10 or 15 minutes. There are days like yesterday where I put in 2 hours. But I try to draw every day, even if it's only for a few minutes. We actually do a lot of daily studies and weekly prompts on the Discord server attached to this channel. And part of that is because I do firmly believe that that's one of the most beneficial ways for all of us to keep moving forward. If that's something you want to check out, by the way, there's a link to it in the description below. We work on weekly drawings together, and it's also just a community to get some feedback on your artwork if that would be beneficial for you. I also think it's worth stating that you need to be careful about labeling yourself as a perfectionist. And mostly this is because you can make it okay if you make it a normal thing. If you are by nature a perfectionist, then you are not responsible for all of the things that flow from that. But if you simply have perfectionistic tendencies, then it is something that you can work through, something you can deal with, something you can hone and improve over time. If you are a perfectionist, then there may be little that you can do with it, except for deal with that trait. But if you allow yourself to think of it as, I have perfectionistic tendencies, something in my youth, perhaps something in my personality, some trauma that I experienced led me to a place where I have this need, I have this tendency to be perfectionistic. All of a sudden now, it is not something that defines you. It is something that is a trait that you have, one that you can decide whether it is beneficial to you or not, and that you can work on if you desire to. And I think this is a really important way of framing things in general, of thinking about yourself and the pieces of you that maybe you do want to work on. At the end of the day, perfectionism is usually a bad thing for artists because it often keeps us from moving forward. And if it does keep you moving forward, chances are it takes some of the pleasure out of it. And after all, part of art, a distinct part of art, is the joy. Well, as always, thank you for your time. I appreciate your comments, your thoughts below. I am not so arrogant to think that I have the perfect knowledge or the exact definitions of how any of these things function. So I really do enjoy hearing from you below, especially if you feel like I was wrong about something, or if you have just additional information to add. I really do appreciate it. And I think there are other people in the community who appreciate it as well, because artists are a little strange, and we all come at things just a little bit differently from one another. The Discord server's link is in the description below if you'd like to check that out. Thank you to Patron Who, What, Where, When for your continued support. And if you're interested in supporting us here at the channel, if you would like to get access to some things early, see the scripts and the outlines for some of these podcasts and sketchbook sessions before they go live, there's a link to Patreon below as well. Of course, just watching and commenting and hanging out with me is also a benefit and is a support in and of itself. So thank you for that. Have a good one, y'all. See you soon.